Hello, Professor Graham Oppy. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks very much for inviting me on.
First of all, can you please introduce yourself? Of course, most of people here know who you are, but I really want to hear you introduce yourself when me, the ones who's asking.
Yep. Okay, so I'm a professor of philosophy at Monash University in Melbourne. I've specialised in philosophy of religion, and I've been doing philosophy of religion for about 30 years, I guess, and I've been active on YouTube for the last 6 or 7 years, I guess. And so at least some people will have heard me speak before.
I've heard a lot of people ask you questions like the nature of arguments, thing like atheism, but I believe there is still no one have ever asked you about your decision regarding choosing philosophy as your major. Why did you choose philosophy?
Okay, so I may have talked about this before, but I'm sorry, it's not super interesting, really. So when I was at school, I quite liked philosophy. I remember there was a teacher gave me, after one class, gave me a copy of Pascal's Ponces and pointed me to the wager argument and said, read this and tell me what you think about it. Um, I decided to do medicine when I finished high school. So I went to Melbourne University and I did a year of medicine. And uh, I can't say that I really enjoyed my medical studies. I spent much more time reading philosophy than I did reading the textbooks for medicine. And so it kind of became obvious to me that I was in the wrong place. And I just decided then that I would transfer to a different degree and study the things I was interested in. And the things I was most interested in were maths, physics, philosophy, and history and philosophy of science. So I did two degrees, an arts degree and a science degree, sort of simultaneously, and just studied those things. I studied a little bit of computer science and one or two other things, but basically, I did a maths major and a philosophy major.
Which one is cooler, you think, philosophy or math?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. Uh, I sort of wish that I was better at maths. I found maths is really difficult, but I think it would be quite cool to be really good at it.
Yeah, so my own experience when dealing with philosophy, at first I think it's like it's quite easy. I have a spirit Islamic spiritual sect background, so dealing with uh, esoteric words like philosophy is quite easy. But then, when I read your books and Joe's books, I start to realize that philosophy also include maths in how they express themselves, and I stop reading a lot of philosophy book back when I find out about that. But yeah, I wish I wish I was good at math too. Okay. In the internet, you're regarded as one of the greatest atheist philosopher. Do you agree with that label? Because I think your atheism is not your main focus. It's like you've become an atheist because your philosophy studies led you to. Okay, do you agree with that label?
Um, no, no, I think that's kind of embarrassing, really. I think that the label of atheist is okay, but it's tricky these days because people in different areas understand the term atheist differently. And
Hmm.
so some people may well kind of get the wrong idea about what I actually believe if all they know about me is that I'm an atheist. And the atheism, in a certain way, is kind of incidental. What my preferred label is naturalist,
Mm.
and the way that I think about these things, the way I use the words atheism is just a consequence of naturalism. So I think, very roughly speaking, that all there is the natural world. There's no that's the full extent of causal reality, and so it kind of follows from that that I think that there aren't gods or there isn't a god and so on, and so that makes me an atheist. But that's not the kind of what's really the central thing that I identify with.
Yeah, I think um, the label atheism that attached to you, it's quite I think most people will dissuade it from wanted to engage in you, especially in Indonesia, because the label atheist is quite profane, blasphemous in our country. But I believe that um, you're not a great atheist philosopher. I think you're just a great philosopher, in my own opinion. So yeah, I'm glad to hear this from you. Have you ever experienced people being uninterested to engage in a conversation with you because the label atheist?
Um, so I guess not really. It, uh, there might be um, some kind of geographical variation with this,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that Christian apologists are often quite eager to talk to me because um, they like the idea of engagement, discussion of the things that we disagree about. And in some ways, it might further their apologetic aims to actually have discussions with me. Takes the audience, takes their message to people that might not otherwise not be hearing it. So I don't think that I've encountered lots of resistance, really. Um, that people who just don't want to talk to me.
Um, so I kind of implied that you've never had a conversation from uh, uh, the likes of Muslim philosopher or maybe Muslim apologist then, yeah.
Um, so that wouldn't be right. I have had some interesting discussions. So going back quite a while now, about a decade ago, I did a talk. Now I can't remember the name of the person, but the Islamic Student Society at Swinburne
Mm,
University asked me to do this talk with a visiting, quite eminent
mm-hmm.
Muslim philosopher, and they kind of set the room up so that we were sitting very far apart, and it was obvious, and the room was full of Muslim students, and it was obvious that they'd sort of thought that it was going to be an antagonistic event. And I insisted that he come and sit next to me, and we share a single microphone backwards and forwards, because and it was quite interesting. It was a very interesting debate. And since then, I've done a number of other discussions, including a couple online with Muslim philosophers. But you would be right if you thought that most of the people that I've talked to have either been atheists or Christian philosophers.
This is just my own opinion. Maybe I assume too much in here, but um, one of the reason why many apologists like to talk to you, especially engage in a debate, I, from my own observation, you rarely attack someone directly. You always have a position of defending your case rather than attacking other people. I saw your debate with Ed Facer, if Ed Facer, and then your conversation with William Lane Craig in Capturing Christianity. It's a very good discussion, by the way, and I really like the way you respond to their arguments and opinions. Is this your strategy, or that's just the way you engage with people? I really want to know it.
Okay, so I mean, I guess if you're asking it sort of, am I genuine? Then I'm going to say yes. Um, the but it's important to distinguish two different sorts of questions
Mhm.
that we can ask. So we can think about various claims and whether we accept them or not. So there's a question about what are your opinions, what are your beliefs, what are the claims that matter to you that you're prepared to affirm. So, and when it comes to questions about God, other philosophical questions in philosophy, I have a set of opinions. They're often very different from what other people think. So we disagree, and we can talk about the reasons that we've got. There's a different sort of set of questions, which is what do you think about the people that disagree with you? Do you think that they must be ignorant or stupid or uninformed or thoughtless or whatever? And there are plenty of people in these kinds of discussions who have that kind of view about everybody who disagrees with them. And I think that's kind of repugnant. That's just wrong, right? There's a range of opinion about these matters that thoughtful, sensible, reflective people come to. And I also think that it's very unlikely that people are going to have their minds changed by short discussions of this kind. So, if I'm talking to Bill Craig or Ed Fazer or someone like that, I'm not going in thinking that my aim here is to make them change their minds, because that's just not going to happen, and I shouldn't expect that it would. They're they're smart, well-educated, well-informed people. They have views that they've been thinking about for a long time. It's very unlikely that there's going to be something that somebody could say to them that's really going to throw them at this stage in their careers. So that's not the point. The point of doing these discussions is, I think, is partly because the audience is going to be quite diverse, and there will be people who are kind of tempted by the kinds of things that I'm going to say, and might find it helpful that there's somebody who's saying them, and also because the kinds of discussions that I have with people like Craig and Fazer model a kind of interaction which I think is proper. And there are lots of other parts of the internet where you get modeling of other behavior which I think is not proper. Right? So,
Yeah. Um, okay. I'm just quite curious. So, as a philosopher myself, I rarely ever engage in debates because I see no point in doing that when, in the end, the two sides that engage in debates most likely won't going to change their mind. Um, Also with the audience, so I think I'm not going to engage in debate if in the end the results is just the same as before, gitu. Like that. What do you think, in your own opinion, the point of debates? I see you engage in a lot of debates. If you don't think that your opponent won't change their mind.
so okay, so there's several things to say here. One is I don't really do debates, not in the formal sense of debate, and not
Uh,
even in a kind of informal sense. And I prefer to think of it as conversation or discussion. And in conversation and discussion, all kinds of things will come up that I haven't really thought through before. And so I learn a lot from the discussions with, discussions with people like Fazer and Craig. I learn a lot from those discussions, so it's profitable for me, and I hope it works the other way around. That also I say things that they haven't thought about before, and so it gives them something to think about as well, right? So I don't think that it's that the kind of right position to have when you go into one of these
uh,
discussions is that you're not going to change your mind about anything, that you kind of know it all and there's nothing that you're going to learn from what the other people are saying. What I do think though is that the kind of big ticket things, like, say we'll think about the view about whether God exists or not, that's unlikely to change as a result of a conversation of this kind.
what are the idea? What are the ideas from people like? Okay, I know a lot about Josh Rasmussen. About William Lane Craig. What are his ideas that able to changed you, or at least informed you of new informations that you've never thought about before?
Okay, so when I was quite new to philosophy of religion, I read the two books that Bill wrote in the late 1970s, the book on the Kalam cosmological argument and his book on cosmological arguments more generally, or maybe it was cosmological arguments from Plato to Leibniz or something like that. I can't remember what the subtitle was exactly. And there was lots of stuff that I learned from reading those books. I mean, for a start, there's this detailing of all these historical arguments that at that point, because I was quite new to philosophy of religion, I wasn't familiar with. But there were lots of ideas about, refining these arguments, ways of trying to strengthen them, and so on. And if we skip forwards to a much more recent book, because you mentioned Josh Rasmussen, the book that Rasmussen and Alex Proust wrote on necessary existence has lots of stuff in it that I hadn't thought about before. Lots of ideas, right? I mean, you would expect if two other philosophers have written a book length treatment of something, there's bound to be stuff in there that you will find is kind of food for thought and gives you stuff to work on.
Um, let's change our topic a little bit. I really want to talk to you about. I want to ask you about this. I think you're quite familiar with the new atheism, the likes of Dan Dennett, late Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, and Richard Dawkins. I believe you are quite acquainted with them.
So, well, I will say, I've when the expression "the Four Horsemen" was first coined, um, around that time, each of them had a book. So Dawkins had published The God
The
Delusion,
delusion.
Harris had published The End of Faith, Hitchens had published God's Not Great, and Dennett had published Breaking the Spell. And around that time, I read all of those books, and then I read some other things that I'm familiar with Dennett because of his much earlier and longer history working in philosophy of mind. And I was familiar with Dawkins because of The Selfish Gene and other books that was a textbook I read when I was an undergraduate. The Selfish Gene was a textbook for a course that I took, so I'd been familiar with Dawkins for a long time. Hitchens and Harris were newer to me. I only sort of knew about them from the books that I read back in the mid 2000s. But yeah, so I certainly would say I had some familiarity with all of them.
What do you think about the new atheism movement that's kind of started from them?
So in some ways, I think it's kind of badly named. Uh,
Yeah.
it was, uh, I think that there are several things that were distinctive of them, and atheism probably wasn't the most important thing. The more important thing, I think, is that they are kind of anti-religion. So
Mm.
they all thought, though perhaps to different degrees, that religion is a problematic force in the world. The world would be better off if there was no religion. Historically, religion's really been a bad thing. And what kind of catalyzed what was happening in the early 2000s was the 9/11 in the United States, and so there's quite a lot of kind of anti-Islamic sentiment, especially in the work of Harris
Mm.
um, and Dawkins. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the new atheism kind of mischaracterizes religion as entirely bad, and it's also paint the atheists in a very bad picture because those label and how those four horsemen I got the name. So I think in my own words, the name new atheism, the four horsemen of atheism is quite I'm sorry to say, but quite cringe, because it's just funny. It's just funny to me because I don't see the need for people um, to campaign for atheism and put four people for their poster for the campaign. I think that's why should you do that? I see no point in doing that. But yeah, so there's one thing I really want to talk to you about. One of the members' conversion to Christianity, Aayan Hirshi Ali. If you're familiar with that, most atheist YouTuber, philosopher YouTuber like not Joe Schmidt, Emerson Green, Alex O'Connor, and yeah, most of them already already sound their opinion in YouTube. Do you have any opinion about Aayan Hirsi Ali's conversion to Christianity?
Um, no, I haven't given it a lot of thought, really. There's, there are conversions that happen in both directions. There are high-profile conversions, and then there are lots of people who are just not in the public eye who change their mind about their faith or lack of faith. Um, so I don't really have any particular um,
Mm-hmm.
claim to make in connection with it.
Okay, yeah, okay. That's a very great answer actually, because yeah, I don't know how to express this one, but yeah, I think yeah, if in Indonesia we have expression like yeah, if they want to do that, just do that. I don't care. It's kind of hard to express in English, but it's goes something like that. So I too actually didn't really care about the conversion. I feel like it's kind of politically motivated, but once again, I'm not a politician, so I don't know I don't know the full story of it, but at least I'm glad the two sides from the Christians and the atheists already sound their opinion. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So yeah, let's talk about your paper about naturalism. Can you define what is to you naturalism?
Okay, so like lots of words in philosophy, it gets used. This word naturalism gets used differently by different people.
Mhm.
So the way that I think about it, there are kind of two parts to naturalism. Some people distinguish between two different kinds of naturalism, whereas I just think of these as two things that kind of go together. So one is a claim about causal reality, that
Mhm.
natural reality exhausts causal reality. There are only natural things and natural causal things and only natural causal properties. And so that will rule out kind of supernatural causes, supernatural beings, and so on. So that's one half of what naturalism says. And the other thing that naturalism says is that when it comes to the natural causal objects and the natural causal properties, um, science is our touchstone. If you want to know what causal things there are, you look to the whole range of the sciences. So the physical sciences, the natural sciences, the human sciences. That's the sciences generally that tell you what causal things there are and what the causal properties are. And notice that this is quite a restricted claim because I've said nothing about what naturalists are going to say about, for example, values, right? Naturalism was just defined in terms of a certain austere view about what the causal objects and the causal properties are. And naturalists disagree amongst themselves about all kinds of things to do with values and politics and so on. Um, that's it. That's what naturalism
Okay.
is.
Um, so, in my opinion, um, by being a naturalist, that entails that um, we not believe, but I still use the word believe. Yeah, we believe that all material causation is explainable scientifically. I'm a naturalist myself, and I'm kind of sometimes I feel uncomfortable with that position because by being a naturalist, once again, we believe all things are explained by science. Where can philosophy take part in the discussion if everything is already explainable by science, by being a naturalist?
Yeah.
That's what I
Right.
want. Okay.
Yeah. So my answer to that question is that naturalism was a quite a restricted thing that told you about natural causal objects and natural causal properties. And so what you would expect, and then science is the touchstone for that. So science will tell you what causal objects there are, and it will tell you what causal properties they have. But there's a lot more to the world than the causal objects and the causal properties,
Yeah.
because, for example, there are questions about, for example, values. Where do values fit into this picture, right? Because values are not not causal objects and they're not
Yeah.
causal properties either, right? And then philosophy also fits into this picture because that kind of question, how to, what's a naturalist going to say about values, is a philosophical question. And it's not that there's a science that's going to answer this question. Right? It's not that science is going to tell you, okay, so this is how normativity arises from the causal world, or this is how value arises from the causal world, or whatever. So there's a whole lot of stuff that I think isn't answered by science and isn't disclosed just by the characterization of naturalism either.
Um. Yeah. What do you think about the philosophy of aesthetics and ethics? I think it's a very hard
Yeah,
kind of
okay. So
philosophy. Hmm.
right, so you've picked out that kind of two domains of value that are particularly important: moral values and aesthetic
Aesthetics.
values. And uh, there's a very big range of positions that, I mean, say we'll go to moral values. So there are some naturalists who think that there's just no such thing as moral values, right? They're just kind of nihilists or eliminativists. There are people who think that there are moral truths and that the moral truths, in part, um, tell you about what the moral values are, but those moral truths are necessary claims. There's no kind of ontology that lies behind them because you don't need ontology for moral truth. It's a bit like mathematics. Some people think that in order for there to be arithmetical truths, there have to be numbers that the truths are about. But other people think, no, that's not right. The truths about numbers are necessary truths, and they don't need a domain of numbers that corresponds to them. So not all people who think that it's true that 1 and 1 and 2 are Platonists, who think that there are abstract objects that are named by the numbers 1 and 2 and so on. And so there are similar positions that you might take in ethics where you think that there are certain moral claims that are necessarily true. For example, I don't know, that it's wrong to kill, except perhaps in certain exceptional cases. And it's not like there's some domain of abstract objects that makes that true. It's just a necessary truth that it's wrong to kill, except in those special cases when you're allowed to. Um, and that's the kind of view about morality that I like, but it's not one that all naturalists accept, right? Because
Hmm.
there are nihilists and eliminativists and all kinds of other positions that subjectivists and so on, all kinds of other positions that naturalists might take.
Um, I try to picture people that believe in the objective moral value, the ultimate truth. I mean, like the creator of maths and so on. Um, of course, not all people feel this, but I believe they want to have an exact answers for that, because in the end, things like moral, maths, in some sense, logic most of us don't know why do they came to be. So I try to answer it myself by saying they want that answer because they just not comfortable in having no answer, and I myself feel uncomfortable by not knowing why is there morality, why are there values, and why are there things such as beauty and such. So maybe one of the reason I still an agnostic is because I'm not comfortable. I'm still trying to find the answer to that. And you seem to comfortable with not even thinking about whether there's an answer or not. Am I correct?
Um, so I guess it doesn't. It's maybe it's not that I don't think that there's an answer. It's rather that I've settled on an answer that that maybe lots of other people wouldn't be happy with. I just think that there can be sort of truths without there being something that makes them true, without there being things or stuff that makes them true. So I think that it's true that one and one are two, but I don't think that there's some abstract domain of Platonic objects that somehow or other serves as the truth maker for the claim
True,
that one
yeah.
and one are two. And I think that the same is the case for morality. So though I mean, the point that you made about uncertainty is interesting because if what I think of as the fundamental moral principles are rather um, underspecified, right? So I think it's wrong to kill, except in special circumstances. Now, what are those special circumstances? Well, some of them we'll agree about, but some of them we don't. Like most people accept that you can kill in self-defense, right? Um, Many people think that you can kill if you're fighting a just war. Some people think, and these are probably related to the killing in self-defense, that you can kill to protect, if you know, I mean, there are qualifications to all of this, but you could kill to protect your nearest and dearest, assuming that there's no other realistic option that's open to you and so on. But then there are controversial cases like, can you kill animals unless you're killing them in self-defense or to protect your nearest and dearest? Um, right, that one seems controversial to me. And then what about first term pregnancies?
Mm-hmm.
Right? First trimester pregnancies. Is it okay to terminate those? Again, that one's controversial, um, and so on. So there's a range of controversial cases. I don't think that there's kind of just definite answers to the controversial cases, but I think that the basic principle that you shouldn't kill, except in the rare cases where you're allowed to, is something that's just true. Right. So that's my view for what it's worth.
Uh, uh, I'm sorry to ask you this, but you're comfortable with that view that okay, that's controversial. Full stop.
Yeah.
Because I think it's very. I've never heard people being content with such position because I myself accepting that those are controversial things, and I do not know the answer for that, and I'm content with that. And I'm quite surprised that you, out of all people, have the same opinion as I am, and it's, in my own words, it's quite cool because yeah, it's controversial. We might never know the answer. We might found the answer always changing all the time. So what? So what? That's my own opinion because yeah, we just don't know. We just don't know. Not
So
knowing. Yeah. Please continue, sir.
So, so I mean, uncertainty is not a bad thing, but
Answer.
also what happens is if you kind of bang your head against difficult issues for long enough, you might find yourself just kind of settling on a bunch of views and thinking, well, I'm I'm content with this. There's lots of stuff I mean, I mean, to go back to the thing you were just saying, one of the things that you have to do is you have to accept that you're going to hardly ever know that you of everything that's known by people, you're only going to know a tiny part of it. You
Yeah.
cannot, like, you go into a big library and you look at all the books on the shelves, right? And you look at the math section and the physics section and the chemistry section, and the biology section, and the sociology section and the history section and so on. You can't. you can't master all that material. There are bound to be lots of things that you're just going to know not very much about. And so you have to be able to accept ignorance, right? That just comes with the territory of being a sensible person.
Oh. Okay. Wait. I'm trying to collect myself again now. Uh, do you think it's okay with the fact that we will never know anything? I think you
So,
already implied
so
that
I
that
don't, I don't, I don't, I don't think that though. I think that we know lots of stuff, right? Because
but not
I think
everything.
that no, sure, we will we it will never be the case that we know everything. There's lots of stuff that we don't know, and there's lots of stuff that we know we can't know.
Hmm.
Also, there's lots of information about history that we simply can't recover, right? It's just gone. There's no traces. So there's all kinds of stuff that happened. So I think about all the stuff that happened in my parents' household before I was born. There's lots and lots of details there that, sorry, both my parents are dead, so right, there's no informants about this. All that information, they were the only witnesses to it, is just gone, right? It will never be recovered, right? So of course, there's lots and lots and lots of stuff that we're just ignorant about, right? You have
Hmm.
to accept that.
Yeah.
But there's lots of stuff that we know. If you compare where we were, say, with respect to knowledge of the natural world at the time that Aristotle started writing, and you compare what we know now, there's it's inconceivable almost how much more we know than Aristotle knew. If you know, go to the libraries, think about what was in the Library of Alexandria and then compare it to what's in the Bodleian Library now, right? We know an enormous amount of stuff um, across a very wide range of domains, but that's we collectively, right?
Hmm.
And lots of it maybe is kind of sort of not stored in any particular person's head. It's there in books or it's there in online or something like that. But we do know a lot. It's just there's this other point that there's even more stuff that we don't know than there is that we know, and that will always be true.
Um. Yeah. So my philosophical doctrine. I create my own philosophy about philosophy doctrine. Um. I put knowledge as the most important thing, and I believe mankind must progress towards an ability to gather as many knowledge as possible. That also includes about knowing the exact event that happened in the past and things like that, because I believe every time we missed on gathering new knowledge, we missed an infinite opportunity of knowing, because yeah, because my philosophy said that knowledge is the most important thing. um I don't accept.
So,
Yes, yeah, yeah. Please continue. Please continue.
so I think you should distinguish though between knowledge that's worth having and knowledge that's really not worth having. Like, um, it really doesn't matter that the kind of internal workings of my parents' household, all this kind of day-to-day stuff, what they had for lunch on a particular day in 1956 and so on. It doesn't matter that all of that information is just gone and can't be recovered. Uh, but we have this view about knowledge that's worth having, and there's lots of that we don't yet have, and we really, I mean, it's quite important. So, for example, I mean, just think about climate change and think about what we don't know about ways that we might mitigate climate change, right? Just to pick one example, it's very important that we keep pursuing that knowledge, trying
Mhm.
to pursue that, right? Um, and it's also true, to add something to what you just said, that sometimes we can't really tell whether something's important or not, and we prefer not to lose information just in case. but it is also the case that there's lots of information that it's fine, that it's gone, and we'll never get it back. Right. I mean, there are people who tried. So there's a really weird recent phenomenon. People who try to document every sort of waking moment. We're one of those uh, things, so that they're making a permanent record of what they're looking at, and making detailed notes about everything, as if somehow or other documenting your life, every kind of trivial moment of your life, is preserving something important. Right. I think I think that's kind of, I mean, maybe it's a bit harsh to just say that it's wrong, but that seems a really weird way to live to me.
Well, I believe my philosophy doctrine is weird. So, I try not to promote my own YouTube channel here, but I document my journal. I put it in a video format. The title of the video is Homoscientia. It's Homoscientia. So Yuval Noah Harari wrote a book about Homo Deus. So it's like a human but godlike, but I don't want to put the word Deus in there, so I change it to Scientia, a human that not necessarily a human, but an entity, maybe post-human, that has the ability to know everything. Yeah, I know this is science fiction. This is weird, ludicrous, and things and such. But I believe, even up until this point, that knowledge is the most important thing ever, and we have to be an entity, progress ourselves towards becoming an entity that has the ability to know everything, even the most trivial things, and the things or events that cease to happen because our own decisions. Yeah, that's a weird philosophy idea and unhinged to some sense. But do you
So,
have any comment on that?
so I do think there are other things that are kind of important, like living well, that
Mm-hmm.
don't require you to know everything, and that are perhaps more important than knowing lots of trivial stuff. Uh, It's interesting. Haven't thought lots. I've thought a little bit about some of the stuff on posthumanism and transhumanism and so on. And it doesn't seem to me that the most important thing right now is to try to make it the case that there's a future in which there are kind of enhanced transhuman or post-human beings that know way, way more than we do now. That doesn't seem to me to be a particularly pressing or important thing for us to be worrying about. It seems to me that the much more pressing and important things have to do with the people who are alive now and the ones that will come in the next few generations, trying to solve problems, particularly about the sort of equitable distribution of resources across the planet. That seems way more important to me.
So um, I think we have to make sure that um, all people in the world have a great quality of living. We have to prioritize for their health, for their financial security, and to ensure that they can live a long life, so they can focus their attention towards knowing. So I kind of work it quite not backward, quite different. Yeah, of course I agree with human well-being, because if they are not well-being, they can't pursue knowledge in the first place. So yeah. Again, I hope you're not dissuaded by my ideas, because I really understand this is weird and rare, maybe, that a philosopher ever had this kind of idea.
So there are other things in life apart from knowledge, even if we kind of focus in on the individual. I mean, if you go back to the to Plato's day, Plato did seem to think that the most important thing was certain kinds of knowledge. But there are other people who emphasize pleasure. There are other people who emphasize virtuous activity. I guess my sympathies lie more with Aristotle than they do with Plato on this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe I'm sorry. I talk a lot about my ideas rather than ask you questions about yours. Is it okay if we continue talking about these ideas, because I've literally never had anyone to talk to about these ideas that I'm having. Uh, so maybe in some sense I'm intrigued by the prospect of omniscience, because I see the attribute of omniscience as the most perfect kind of being that the entity in this world could be, and I somehow still tempted to believe that such omniscience is somehow attainable. So maybe the point is not about being all about knowing, yeah, all knowing. The point is about to become some godlike entity that who knows that we can become one. Yeah, once again, I have a background from a very strict Islamic sect, which they always portrays a very particular looking like a divine being. And since that I no longer believe in such being, but I still believe in the characteristics that somehow we can maybe attain that godhood. Yeah, godhoodness. I want to say godhoodness, but yeah, maybe I'm still influenced by such thinking. And actually, okay. Do you have anything to say about it?
So, but it's interesting that you're thinking about this in terms of omniscience rather than in terms of some kind of broader kind of perfectibility. So, so this is a kind of question for you. Why focus in particular on knowledge rather than on a wider range of things? So, being able to do more things, being more virtuous, as well as being more knowledgeable.
I, the world, our universe is way too vast. That's the first thing with our own ability to know, we can't know everything about our universe. And because first we are limited in our capacity of knowing. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, I'm afraid we are the only entity that has the ability to do so. And I'm afraid if we manage to extinguish ourselves, there will be no other entity in this universe that has the ability to. I use the word to know itself. I believe we are the universe itself. Try to uncover everything about the universe itself. Not don't put it in a spiritual way. This is a very philosophical way. So yeah. Because I believe that we are the only entity, at least so far as we know. We somehow have some kind of obligation to record everything, to archive everything that happens in the universe. I'm just cannot accept the fact that in some like 5.6 billion years from now, the universe will, no, not the universe, the sun will become a black hole, and the earth will subsequently become unlivable. And if from 5.6 billion years from now we cannot travel to outer galaxy, we will extinguished along with our solar system. But do we have enough resources to use in this Earth to travel to outer galaxy? I think we don't. That's why I try to invite many astrophysicists to answer these questions. I think we cannot progress ourselves far enough in terms of technological and resources to travel to our next let's say our neighboring galaxy, because yeah, our neighboring galaxy is way too far compared with even our sun. So if we cannot transport our physical body into our neighboring galaxy, I think by that fact we will extinguish together with our knowledge, our ability to know things, with the sun becoming a black hole. So if we cannot transport our body, I think we can. Okay, this is the fun. This is the fun part. I think we should evolve our ability to become evolve ourselves to become an entity that can know things without without having the host of physical body like this. Have you ever heard anything like this philosophical idea, Professor?
So, in some ways, what you're saying is very similar to things that Freeman Dyson
Freeman
was
Dyson.
saying was saying 30 or 40 years ago. So he had this idea that we could make sort of self-replicating machines that we could use to populate the galaxies, and what part of the information that would travel with the machines would be genetic codes, so that organisms could be re-established on whatever planets the machines went to that were capable of supporting organic life. So, you could the machines would be kind of very general purpose machines, but would be given this goal of trying to spread organisms wherever they could throughout the universe. And that would involve, the equivalent of terraforming lots of planets, because although Dyson didn't know this, at the time that he was writing, he kind of guessed that there would be plenty of planets in the kind of habitable zone surrounding, orbiting stars in this galaxy and other galaxies that could be kind of terraformed. So his kind of vision was that our descendants, in some sense, would eventually populate the universe. But that that plan, even if it was feasible, even if that wasn't just a kind of science fantasy, it definitely has an end date, right? So if you project not 6 billion years into the future, but say 10 to the 40 years into the future, when protons decay, there's not going to be stars, planets, organisms, right? The future just doesn't have that in store, and it's not like that's reversible, right? So, so while you might think the time scale is much bigger, the end result is just going to be the same. So, I mean, it's kind of a nice fantasy, but I don't think it's reality.
But do you find with knowing that in the future we might just be extinguished without having nothing new to discover?
So am I fine with it? So, the most pessimistic views that I've heard about this think that we'll be extinguished before the end of this century. I'm not fine with that. Right? That's if I happen to have grandchildren, the human on that kind of projection, the human race might perish with them. And that's really a kind of horrifying thought. But the idea that the that that humanity might only last thousands of years or tens of thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of years, that doesn't seem so horrifying. I mean, if you look back at every the truth is that every species goes extinct, right? Um, every species is in the process of going extinct, and that will happen to us too. And we shouldn't be worried about that. What we should be worried about is what we're doing with the time that we've got, and trying to look after people for a reasonable kind of distance into the future. But I actually not in the least bit worried about by the thought that in 10 to the 40 years there won't be any people, and probably In a billion years, there won't be any people. That doesn't seem concerning to me. Maybe that's strange, but that's how I feel about it.
Uh, uh, of course, I don't think your opinion is strange. I think it's very insightful. At least it's kind of um, calming myself a little bit because I always, in the age of existential angst, with all the philosophy idea that I had, and what I want to ask you um, was is your opinion is support not supported because is your opinion backed because you are a philosopher, or it's just you yourself try to make peace with the fact of our universe? What philosophy do to you
So
with yeah.
so the ideas that we've now been talking about, so the discussion about Freeman Dyson and attitudes about the far distant future, I wrote a paper back in the late 90s called Physical Eschatology, in which I discussed all of these
Cool name.
ideas. Now, did I didn't just do that because I'm a philosopher, but it's part of my professional life as well as um, and it, as well as presumably being some reflection of me, because I don't think that my opinions are kind of widely shared on this topic. I think that lots of people think that it's kind of a tragedy if humanity becomes extinguished, even in 10 to the 40 years from now. Whereas I just don't see that as a tragedy. What would be, it would be a tragedy if we wiped ourselves out now, needlessly. and, but it will also be a tragedy if there's all kinds of things that we ought to be doing now that we fail to do, right? Um, like finding some way to equalize the distribution of resources across the planet. Well,
Yeah. Okay, once again I try to collect myself. Okay, I have two last questions. Actually, I want to give you one more opinion. So, regarding our last 10 minutes discussion about knowledge. So, about 1 month ago, you have a conversation with Alex O'Connor about the agnosticism must justify themselves too, if I'm not mistaken, the title was. But what I want to comment is he presented an analogy about a bear being in the room, and you cannot prove to me that there is no bear in that room, while I claim that there is actually a bear. Of course, both of us agree that there is no such bear in such room. But I think so. First of all, I treat this kind of problem seriously. I know it's funny, but I treat it seriously. You cannot prove it. Of course, it's you cannot prove it's wrong. Although definitely it is wrong. First of all, there is no bear in Lombok. There is never such a bear existed in Lombok at the first place. But we can only make such argument about it's not being real. We can never empirically prove to both you and I that the bear is non-existent. So to scroll back to our conversation about the importance of knowing without having a physical body, the way I think it's important to have the ability. Okay, this is science fiction. I know it's important to have the ability to know that there is no such bear, almost in an empirical sense, not just by abductive arguments and logic. So yeah, maybe that was just a very analogical story about a conversation between you and Alex, but I treat it very seriously.
so,
Um,
so um, in at least a kind of everyday sense, you know that there aren't bears in
yes.
Lombok. Of course, it could happen that a billionaire flies in his, in his private jet and brings a bear to Lombok, and then you'll just be wrong, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I think that the way that we ordinarily use the term, there aren't bears in Lombok, and you know that there aren't, and that's fine. If there's somebody who's um, convinced for some perhaps bad reason, but perhaps not, somebody who's convinced that there's a bear, it may be very hard to persuade them otherwise, right? Um, so, and in this kind of conversation, it's important to worry about testimony, right? So suppose that
Mhm.
there's someone who thinks there's a bear in Lombok because there have been all these people who they trust telling them that there's a bear in Lombok, right? Well, now it's not irrational for them to believe it, even if, you know,
Mhm.
the mistake that they've made is that they're trusting people who they shouldn't be trusting as informants, right?
Yeah. Okay, two last questions. The first one is, what is the mystery of life that you hope to be uncovered in the future in your lifetime?
So that's a really hard question to answer, right? Um, there are lots and lots of so far unanswered scientific questions across all of the disciplines: physics, chemistry, biology, and so on. Um, I've never really thought about, okay, so what's the one thing that I would most like us to discover so that I get to know it?
Yeah.
Right. So discover it soon so that I get to know it. I don't really have an answer to that question. Sorry. I really would have to go away and think about it.
Okay, no problem. Okay, the last question. What do you think philosophy in the future would look like?
Okay. I mean, it's easier to answer this question, but only by kind of deflating the question, right? Predicting the future about almost anything is really hard, right? So, predicting what uh, very few people predicted the global financial crisis. Very few people predicted with great accuracy the COVID epidemic, right? There's predicting the future is really hard. When it comes to philosophy, right? Um, who knows? Who knows what the future is going to look like? And one of the interesting things about philosophy is that it does have um, there's some ways in which it's kind of cyclical. So you get ideas that are popular for a while and then they're not popular and then they become popular again and then they cease to be popular again and so on. So maybe philosophy will go on looking a bit like that. But that's not to predict. Like if you pick a year, 2060, what are the views that are going to be popular in 2060? Who knows, right? Um, and what schools or philosophy will be dominant in 2060? Who knows, right? That's I so in my book, Atheism: The Basics, there's a concluding section about what atheism might look like in the future, and I just give this kind of skeptical response. Who knows? Even predicting what atheism will look like in 10 years' time, that is, what percentage of people will be atheists? Will atheism still be growing in the way that it seems to have been doing for the last 100 years, at least in the West? Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? That's the system that we're talking about is too big and too volatile to make serious predictions about it, according to me.
But it's exciting, right?
Yeah. Oh, and it's kind of disappointing that 2060 I won't get to see, so I'm not going to know what the world's like then. But that's our lot as humans.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Professor Graham Oppy, thank you very much for coming.
And thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.